Once, Sega was the fearless innovator that outsmarted Nintendo, electrified arcades worldwide, and unleashed Sonic upon the world. Within a decade, it burned through $12 billion and vanished from hardware almost overnight. Was this a tragedy of reckless ambition, or the result of deeper flaws no one saw coming? To understand how such triumph turned to collapse, we need to go back to the frantic, risk-taking DNA that powered Sega's earliest days and see where the first cracks began to show. In 1946, a small company called Service Games opened its doors in Hawaii, supplying coin-operated machines to U.S. military bases. The world was rebuilding, and entertainment meant pinball, jukeboxes, and mechanical amusements. By the early 1960s, the company had crossed the Pacific and split into two Japanese firms, Nihon Goraku Busan handling distribution, and Nihon Kikai Seizo focused on manufacturing. These routes laid the groundwork for what would soon become Sega. The real breakthrough came in 1966 with the debut of Periscope. This was not just another arcade cabinet. It was 6 feet long and submarine-themed, and it drew crowds with flashing lights and booming sound effects. Periscope's success was not limited to Japan. Sega exported the machine to Europe and North America, where it became a sensation and set a new price point for arcade play, $0.25 per game. That single innovation changed the economics of the arcade industry and put Sega on the map as a technical trailblazer. Throughout the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Sega churned out new arcade hits at a relentless pace. The company's engineers worked in short cycles, constantly refining hardware and inventing new mechanics. Games like Gunfight and Monaco GP pushed technology forward, but just as important was Sega's habit of rapid iteration. If a game was not catching on, it was back to the drawing board in weeks, not years. This approach bred a culture of bold experimentation and technical confidence. Sega's teams grew used to chasing the next big thing, never satisfied to rest on a single success. By the end of the 1970s, Sega had become one of Japan's largest amusement machine operators. Its arcades were filled with the company's own creations, and its manufacturing arm had mastered the art of building reliable, innovative hardware. The coin-op business demanded speed and adaptability, traits that would become both Sega's greatest strength and, in time, a hidden vulnerability. The company's DNA was forged in the glow of arcade cabinets and the clatter of coins, always pushing for the next hit, always betting on the power of new technology. In July 1983, Sega entered the living room for the first time with the SG-1000. On paper, the hardware delivered solid performance, with an 8-bit Zilog Z80 processor, color graphics, and interchangeable cartridges. But the timing could not have been worse. Nintendo's Famicom hit Japanese shelves on the very same day, backed by a growing library of must-have games and a distribution network built for mass appeal. While Sega's engineers prided themselves on technical reliability, the SG-1000 struggled to find a foothold. Sales reached about 150,000 units, triple internal expectations, but a fraction of Nintendo's numbers. The SG-1002 followed a year later, adding minor improvements, yet the gap only widened as Famicom mania swept Japan. Sega's arcade roots were evident in the SG-1000's game selection, fast and challenging, but often thin on depth compared to Nintendo's expanding catalog. The company's expertise in hardware design outpaced its ability to nurture a broad, compelling software library. Internally, debate simmered. Should resources stay with arcades or double down on home consoles? The tension never fully resolved. By 1985, Sega made a second attempt. The Mark III, later branded as the Master System overseas, entered the market with technical advantages over the NES, including better graphics, more colors, and a sleeker design. But hardware alone was not enough. In Japan, Nintendo's grip on third-party developers meant that Sega's library remained sparse. In North America, Sega lacked the retail muscle and marketing savvy to break through. Recognizing this, Sega of America struck a deal in 1986 with Tonka, the toy giant famous for steel trucks. The plan was to leverage Tonka's distribution channels and toy store relationships to get the Master System into more homes. Tonka invested $30 million in marketing, but the results fell short. The Master System never reached 1 million units sold during the agreement, and Tonka's financial troubles, worsened by a costly acquisition, left little room for bold moves or risk-taking. The early console push revealed Sega's strengths and weaknesses in sharp relief. Technical know-how and arcade pedigree could not overcome the lack of blockbuster software or the marketing clout needed to sway consumers. The Master System's underwhelming performance in the West set the stage for future clashes between Sega's engineers and its overseas distributors, foreshadowing deeper organizational rifts to come. August 1989. Sega's new console, the Genesis, arrived in North America with a promise: arcade power at home. The hardware packed a 16-bit Motorola 68000 processor, outclassing Nintendo's aging Nintendo Entertainment System in speed and graphics. But it wasn't just the tech that caught attention. It was the attitude. Sega of America, under the leadership of Tom Kalinske, pushed for a bold strategy, price cuts, aggressive advertising, and a focus on older kids and teens who wanted something edgier than Mario. Sonic the Hedgehog burst onto the scene in June 1991, blue spikes and all, instantly becoming a pop culture icon. Sonic was fast, rebellious, and cool, the anti-Mario. Sega bundled Sonic with every Genesis, making the mascot inseparable from the console's identity. The message was clear: Sega was for the next generation, and it wasn't afraid to take risks. Kalinsky's approach went beyond mascots. He convinced headquarters in Japan to slash the Genesis price, greenlight American-developed games, and pour resources into marketing campaigns that didn't just challenge Nintendo, they taunted them. The infamous phrase, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," ran on TV and in magazines, pushing Sega into the spotlight and giving the brand a swagger that resonated with kids across the country. By 1992, Genesis sales soared, grabbing nearly 65% of the United States' 16-bit market. The company's share of the global home console market jumped to around 30 to 40%. Sonic merchandise filled store shelves, and Sega's name became shorthand for gaming's cutting edge. The company's arcade roots powered a steady stream of hits, but now the home console division was driving the business forward. This runaway success brought new confidence and new demands. Sega's American team was growing fast, pushing for more autonomy and faster innovation. Budgets ballooned to keep up with marketing and game development. Inside Sega, the sense of possibility felt limitless. For a moment, it seemed like nothing could slow them down. The early 1990s brought a new kind of pressure to Sega's hardware division. With the Genesis riding high, executives looked for ways to stretch its success even further. The answer, at least on paper, was add-ons, bolt-on devices that promised to push the console into the next era without waiting for a true successor. In late 1992, Sega released the Sega CD, a $299 peripheral that plugged into the Genesis and boasted futuristic CD-ROM technology. The pitch was alluring: full motion video, bigger games, and a glimpse of tomorrow. But the reality was less impressive. Most households balked at paying nearly twice the price of the console for an upgrade. The launch lineup was thin, relying on a handful of experimental titles and grainy video clips that looked more novel than fun. Developers hesitated, unsure whether to commit resources to a platform with so few owners. Instead of doubling down on a single path, SEGA doubled the confusion. In November 1994, the 32X arrived, a mushroom-shaped add-on promising 32-bit graphics and arcade-style power for $159.99. But the Saturn, SEGA's true next-generation console, was already on the horizon. Buyers were left guessing, should they invest in a pricey add-on or wait for the real leap? Retailers struggled to keep track of a growing list of stock-keeping units: Genesis, SEGA CD, 32X, bundles, and games that sometimes required 2 devices just to run. Shelves became crowded, and store clerks grew frustrated trying to explain what worked with what. For players, the excitement of new tech quickly soured into uncertainty. The 32X library never reached more than a few dozen titles, and the SEGA CD catalog was equally sparse outside Japan. Each add-on split the audience and drained developer attention. Instead of a single, clear upgrade path, SEGA's brand became a tangle of options and half-steps. The company's reputation for innovation now carried a whiff of desperation, as consumers began to question whether any SEGA purchase would be relevant a year later. The sense of trust, once the Genesis's strongest asset, began to erode, not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow build of confusion and doubt. In 1992, Sony approached SEGA with a proposal that could have changed the future of gaming. Sony wanted to collaborate on a next-generation console, pooling Sony's electronics expertise with SEGA's gaming know-how. Discussions took place at the highest levels, with Tom Kalinske and Olaf Olofsson building on a productive software partnership, and technical teams in Tokyo debating the architecture of a joint system. Sony pushed for a machine centered on 3D graphics, while SEGA's engineers insisted on preserving robust 2D capabilities. The two visions never aligned. The decisive meeting happened in Shinagawa, Tokyo. Sony's president, Norio Oga, and Ken Kutaragi sat across from SEGA's Hayao Nakayama and Hideki Sato. Oga revealed that Sony had once tried to buy SEGA outright, a move that landed poorly with Nakayama. Beneath the formalities, a deeper anxiety simmered. Sony's annual sales dwarfed SEGA's, and the SEGA board feared entering a partnership where Sony would inevitably dominate. Hideki Sato voiced the concern directly. With Sony's size and resources, SEGA risked becoming the junior partner in its own industry. Nakayama agreed. The proposal was rejected, not through a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet decision to walk away. SEGA's leadership believed they did not need help. They had just beaten Nintendo in America, and their own next-generation hardware was already on the drawing board. Pride and territorial instinct won out over strategic analysis. The board voted down the alliance, sending Sony back to its own drawing board. Within 2 years, Sony would unveil the PlayStation, built on the very 3D ambitions SEGA had dismissed. The missed partnership planted the seeds for SEGA's greatest rival, and the industry's balance of power began to tilt. On May 11, 1995, the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles erupted with news that stunned the gaming world. SEGA's American chief, Tom Kalinske, announced that the Saturn was not coming in the fall as planned. It was available that very day at select retailers. The move blindsided nearly everyone. Major chains like KB Toys and Walmart had no warning, and many learned about the release only after customers started asking for the console. Retailers who were left out of the launch felt betrayed with some refusing to stock Saturn games or hardware for months. The surprise rollout fractured Sega's retail relationships at the very moment it needed their support. Inside Sega, the decision had been driven by panic. Japanese executives feared Sony's PlayStation would seize the spotlight, so they pushed for an early launch, even if it meant breaking promises. But the Saturn was not ready. Only 30,000 units shipped at launch, far below demand, and only 6 games were available. Developers scrambled to finish titles for a system notorious for its complexity. The Saturn's dual CPU design, chosen to maximize arcade power, turned out to be a nightmare for programmers. Porting games from other platforms took longer and produced weaker results. Tomb Raider, for example, arrived late and underwhelming compared to its PlayStation version. Consumers faced a wall of confusion. The Genesis was still on shelves. The 32X add-on had barely launched, and now the Saturn arrived with little warning and a $399 price tag. Many players and developers hesitated, unsure where Sega's loyalty lay. As PlayStation's launch approached, Sega's market share began to erode. The Saturn's rushed debut, meant to outflank the competition, left the company isolated, with angry retailers, frustrated developers, and a shrinking audience. Dreamcast powered on with a sense of possibility that hadn't been felt at Sega in years. Engineers packed the console with a 200 MHz Hitachi SH-4 processor and a Power 5R2 graphics chip, delivering visuals that rivaled arcade cabinets. But the real leap came from the built-in 56K modem, standard in every box, inviting players into a new era of online gaming. For the first time, a home console shipped ready for internet play. Phantasy Star Online let strangers across continents team up in real time, a vision that felt almost futuristic in 1999. Innovation didn't stop at the network cable. The Dreamcast's VMU, the visual memory unit, slid into the controller like a memory card, but doubled as a tiny standalone game device. Players could raise virtual pets in Sonic Adventure, then unplug the VMU and care for them on the go. The controller itself, with its analog stick and triggers, felt like a bridge between arcade tradition and something entirely new. Launch titles set a high bar. Sonic Adventure reimagined Sega's mascot in 3D, while Soul Calibur drew crowds for its fluid motion and sharp detail. Crazy Taxi and Power Stone brought the arcade home in ways that felt immediate and alive. For a moment, Sega's old spirit of invention was back, and the press responded with praise. Pre-orders surged, and lines formed outside stores on launch day. Inside Sega, hope flickered that hardware brilliance could still win the future, even as financial warning signs lingered just out of view. On January 31, 2001, Sega's board gathered to confront a reality that could no longer be ignored. The Dreamcast, once seen as a lifeline, had become an anchor. PlayStation 2's arrival, with its built-in DVD player and massive third-party support, wiped out any hope of recovery. Retailers slashed shelf space, and developers shifted resources to Sony's platform. Inside Sega, the numbers grew impossible to justify. Hardware losses mounted quarter after quarter, with unsold inventory piling up in warehouses and operating deficits reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. The company's arcade business, once a reliable fallback, was shrinking fast. The board voted to end production of the Dreamcast and withdraw from the hardware market altogether. That same day, Sega publicly declared its exit from console manufacturing, sending shockwaves through the industry. For hundreds of engineers and designers, the announcement landed like a gut punch. Careers built on hardware innovation were suddenly adrift. Behind the scenes, Isao Okawa stepped forward. As chairman and Sega's largest creditor, Okawa personally forgave over $500 million in loans and gifted another $695 million in company stock to keep Sega afloat. His intervention bought time and eased the transition, but it could not erase the pain of failure. The $12 billion collapse was now a matter of record, years of investment, talent, and ambition written off in a single boardroom decision. Yet, even as the hardware era closed, a new path opened. Sega would survive as a software developer, free from the risks and burdens of hardware. The company's future would be built on the strength of its games, not its machines. For those who stayed, the challenge was clear: reinvent Sega or disappear. Today, Sega exists only as a software icon. Its hardware legacy is scattered across collectors' shelves and digital memories. In a $180 billion gaming industry, every company still faces the same razor edge: innovation versus overreach. The fall of Sega warns that vision alone isn't enough. Survival demands discipline. In gaming, as in business, second chances rarely come twice. Share your thoughts on Sega's legacy below.